For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. Máire Fisher joins me to discuss her novel titled The Enumerations. Can you briefly tell us what this novel is about?
It's about a young boy. His name is Noah Groome, and he battles with OCD, and which is Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. And he's seeing a therapist, but then something happens at school, and there's a big incident. It happens right at the beginning of the book, and as a result of that, he lands up in a treatment center called Green Hills. So it tells you the story, his story, and his story of fighting against OCD and trying to fight against the darkness that invades him, really. But at the same time, it tells the story of his family as well. His mom, her name is Kate. His father's name is Dominic. He has a little sister called Maddie. And then some of the people that he meets while he's in the clinic as well, particularly a young girl called Juliet. And then beyond that, or behind that, I suppose, there's another story of another young boy whose name is Gabriel. And that sort of ties into the main story, and the reason for it becomes evident sort of towards the end of the book.
You are addressing a very sensitive subject, obsessive compulsive disorder. Why did you feel there was a need to tackle it?
Well, for starters, it is being addressed a lot more than it used to be. So it's not something that is as hidden. Not hidden is the wrong word, but something that isn't discussed. You know, it's coming to the front a lot more. But it's not as if I set out to write a book about somebody who was OCD. That wasn't my aim. I didn't think, oh well, I think I'll write. This is a story that needs to be told. Not that it isn't a story that needs to be told. But what happened was, I'd been writing for quite a while, and in that time I had written a few sort of half-finished novels, and they were sitting waiting to be finished. So when I finished Bird's Eye, which was my first novel, I went to my drawer where the other novels were languishing, and in the one story which I thought might be worth going back to see if there was something more to be written, there was a woman called Maddie who was working in a bookshop. And she had a brother who was in some sort of treatment center, but I didn't know why or what. I just had sort of created her, and he sort of came along with her into that particular story. So I thought, well, let me go back into their past to see what it is that he's dealing with. And so I went to start exploring him, and he just took over the story. So Maddie became his younger sister. There's a woman still sitting in a bookshop, in a novel in a bookshop, and at some point I really should go back and tell her story. But in the meantime, she's lost her name and she's lost her brother. So once this character appeared, then it became a case of finding out more about him. And once it became apparent that he had OCD, it became something then that I had to go into deeply, as deeply as I could as a layperson, to research and to find out as much as I possibly could about it.
How serious is this disorder, and does the book help the readers to better understand it?
Well, it's debilitating, I think is the right word to use. It can be something that takes over your life to the extent that you can't, unless you have done a certain number of things a certain way, it's almost like it's like you're in a prison that is made up of rules and regulations, and there are different types of OCD as well. So Noah, for example, has to tap and he has to count. So he counts to, 5 is the number that he feels protects him, that keeps his family safe. So everything revolves around the number 5 for him. And things have to balance and they have to line up, and so he's a counter and a checker. But OCD can present in a number of different ways. And so, for example, you might get somebody who has an absolute dread of contamination. And if they touch something, they have to go through various rituals to make sure that they're clean. So it's very serious, it's very debilitating. And so for me, as I said, the research was really, really important. And I hope it is. I've had feedback saying that it is a very useful book, and I hope that part of that is down to the fact that after I had written it, I asked a couple of people who are experts in the field if they would read it for me and make sure that I had got things right. Because the last thing I wanted to do was because it's a delicate area to move into when you don't have the knowledge yourself, you know. So I had to be absolutely sure that I was being true to a character like Noah and not misrepresenting him and his condition, and then maybe by extension other people and their conditions. So the research was important, and then getting people to say that it was okay was very important, yeah.
The novel also addresses the painful subject of bullying. How bad was it for Noah since he was OCD?
I think, I mean, if you were to look at Noah as he appeared sort of in my imagination, you get this tall, very good-looking young man whose sister says he's the best-looking boy in his class, okay? So in another sort of set of circumstances, he'd be doing okay as a young, good-looking guy. But then when you look a bit closer, you see that he's perfectly turned out. Everything is just so. And when you look even more closely and you observe him, you see that he can't walk without counting under his breath, and he can't move without, on a bad day, he has to tap the side of the wall as he walks. So he has all these things that he has to do. So the more you observe him, the more different he becomes. And I think it's a sad truth that bullies then are attracted. I mean, people like Noah are magnets for bullies. And he's a big boy, he's tall, but he's not the sort of boy that would push back or fight back. So he's easy to push around. And that's what makes his little sister, Maddie, very concerned about him, because she almost feels that she has to be his protector and his guardian.
Without giving too much, can you briefly share with us the events that his family had to go through while navigating through his condition?
Well, it's a difficult one to answer without giving up too much away. But I think maybe the best way to look at it is, in his family, you've got his mom, Kate, who is very concerned about her son, and then and making, you know, trying to juggle everything, trying to make sure Noah's doing okay, hoping that Maddie isn't being left out of things, trying to sort of hold everything together. But her husband Dominic seems to, the more difficult things become within the home, the more Dominic seems to be distancing himself from the situation. And so the question is why? You know, why isn't Dominic sort of stepping up and stepping forward and being part of a couple so that he and his wife can be doing this together? So that's a good question, I think, for the reader to hold in their mind, and it might be, there might be some reason for that, but I can't say more.
What can you tell parents who are also dealing with their kids who are OCD?
I think the thing to do is to recognize that sometimes it's very difficult to say there's something wrong with my child, or my child needs help. And sometimes, I mean, if you take somebody like Kate, even at the very beginning, she was saying things like, "Oh, that's just Noah, he'll be fine. You know, once he's got through this patch, things will sort themselves out." And then realizing the more dire it becomes, the more it isn't going to sort itself out. And so for parents to realize, to acknowledge, and then to support their children in whatever way they can, but that's not always the easiest thing to do. You know, you've got to know that there are the facilities available for help, and then to support their children, I suppose, is the big thing.
This is not your first novel. Can you tell us why this genre is appealing to you?
Well, I've written for a long time. I started writing seriously when I was about 40, and I only published when I was 56. So I'm a very, very late bloomer, to say the very least. But I like writing short stories. I really, really enjoy them. But in a novel, it's almost like a short story. It takes your focus into a fine point, and you focus on one particular thing and deal with that one particular thing. Whereas in a novel, you've got room to expand and room to explore, and characters can grow beyond the confines of 5,000 words. And with the first novel, with Bird's Eye, I had actually written, there's a terrible, terrible grandmother in Bird's Eye, okay. And in that, I had actually written a short story, which is in another book, about a grandmother who comes to stay and who is a piece of work, really. So, and I can remember when I finished it thinking there's a lot more mileage in a character like that. So it was quite nice then to put her into a book where she could become truly, truly awful, you know. Different situation, but same sort of personality.
And lastly, have you had any feedback from those who have read the book?
From the Enumerations?
Yes.
Yes, I've had great feedback so far, which has been, when you write a first novel, you don't know what to expect. So anything positive is a great blessing. But with the second one, I was very nervous because people liked the first one. You just hope that they will like the second one as well. So it was a great relief to get. I've had a couple of really lovely reviews in the newspapers, and I've had great feedback on Facebook. There's a site on Facebook called the Good Book Appreciation Society where people have been saying that they enjoyed it. I've had a friend of my dad's, gave it to her daughter, whose daughter is OCD, and she loved it. So it's great to get that sort of feedback. Wonderful. And then also, I mentioned in the book there's a mother and daughter team in Germany. And I sent it to them because the daughter was highly OCD and she was in a clinic in Germany for treatment. And I asked them if they would be prepared to read it for me. And they did. And their feedback was fantastic. Wow. And they also gave me a lot of information then that I was able to feed into the book in terms of the treatment that Noah received. So, yeah, I've been very grateful for the feedback, and I've been very lucky with the people who've helped me in the exploration and the finding out about Noah. So it's been great, yeah.
Thank you. That was Máire speaking to Polity about her novel titled The Enumerations.